Headquarters, Provisional Army, CSA. Sir, the government of the Confederate States has hitherto forborne from any hostile demonstration against Fort Sumter in the hope that the government of the United States, with a view to the amicable adjustment of all questions between the two governments and to avert the calamities of war, would voluntarily evacuate it. There was a reason at one time to believe that such would be the course pursued by the government of the United States, and under that impression, my government has refrained from making any demand for the surrender of the fort. But the Confederate States can no longer delay assuming actual possession of a fortification commanding the entrance of one of our harbors and necessary to its defense and security. I am ordered by the government of the Confederate States of America to demand the evacuation of Fort Sumter. All proper facilities will be afforded for the removal of yourself and your command, together with company arms and property and all private property, to any posts in the United States which you may select. The flag which you have upheld so long, and with such fortitude, under the most trying circumstances, may be saluted by you on taking it down. I am, sir, very respectfully, your obedient servant, G.T. Beauregard, Brigadier General, commanding. Fort Sumter, South Carolina. General, I have the honor to acknowledge the receipt of your communication demanding the evacuation of this fort, and to say in reply that it is a demand with which I regret that my sense of honor and my obligations to my government prevent my compliance. Thanking you for the fair, manly, and courteous terms proposed and for the high compliment you paid me, I am, General, very respectfully, your obedient servant. Major Anderson says he cannot evacuate Fort Sumter. April 12th, 1861, 3:20 a.m. Fort Sumter, South Carolina. Sir, by authority of Brigadier General Beauregard, commanding the provisional forces of the Confederate States, we have the honor to notify you that he will open the fire of his batteries on Fort Sumter in 1 hour from this time. We have the honor to be, very respectfully, your obedient servants. Today, April 12th, 1861, marks the beginning of what most consider the official start of the American Civil War, war between the states, whatever you want to call it. Faced off two countries against each other. One, the United States of America, which of course represented the northern states, versus the Confederate States of America, which represented the southern states. The lower South had seceded when Lincoln was elected president. The upper South seceded after Lincoln called for an invasion of the South. Whichever side you're on, for either side, it is perhaps the greatest tragedy in American history. 600,000 Americans at least would perish in the American Civil War on both sides. It started there at Fort Sumter as far as actual shots fired. Major Anderson, the northern general in command of the fort, refused to evacuate it after South Carolina, or the Confederate States, had demanded he evacuate it because Confederate States is seceded, therefore it's our country now, you need to leave. We don't recognize that as a federal installation anymore. Major Anderson, under Lincoln's orders, says, no, I'm not going to do it. By the way, Beauregard and Anderson were old acquaintances. They had graduated West Point together and had knew each other for a long time. They say, Anderson says, no, I can't evacuate. Beauregard says, well, then from 1 hour from this time, I open fire. And at 4:30 a.m. on April 12th, 1861, General Beauregard opened fires on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. The bombardment lasted 34 hours, and then Major Anderson of the United States did surrender the fort and evacuated it. Interestingly enough, not a single man was killed in the bombardment of the fort. Now, one man did die as they gave a salute of guns to the Confederate forces. So the Confederate forces fired off cannon in salute to the Yankee forces, and then the northern forces on Fort Sumter fired a salute in return to honor each other. And in that salute, one of the cannons exploded, killing one northern soldier, which was the only fatality of the day. So Fort Sumter was evacuated, and southern forces took over. And after that, President Lincoln called for an invasion of the southern states, and for 4 bloody years, the two countries, the Confederate States and the United States, were embroiled in the worst war in the history of this continent. As I said before, over 600,000, and that's a conservative number, were slaughtered in this struggle. By the way, this happened on April 12th. On the day of this filming, April 9th, is when it would all, for all practical purposes, come to an end. On April 9th, 1865, almost 4 years to the day, General Lee would surrender the last major Southern army at Appomattox, Virginia, to General Ulysses S. Grant, bringing an end to the conflict. Whichever side you're on, it is a great tragedy. You have graveyards across the country with the Civil War dead. Across the South, you have Confederate cemeteries. Across the North, like at Gettysburg and Antietam, you have cemeteries there for the Northern fallen. You had those fighting for what they thought was right, the preservation of their Union. You had those fighting for what they thought was right, states' rights. Also, just simply the fact that there was an army in their state fighting for what they thought was right. Both sides, hundreds of thousands perished, dying for what they believed in. The memory of neither should be tarnished. So on this day, April 12th, 1861, Fort Sumter bombarded, considered the official beginning of the Civil War. And that's how such a horrible war began, with such courtesy and gentlemanly behavior between these two old friends. This is Mr. James Lyon signing off for CCA High School.